Hello, 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 and welcome. We are now at movie 6, episode 6 of the original trilogy of Star Wars. And, well, we're at lecture 5. We're reaching sort of the end of this original trilogy. So, I'm Nick Lugo, and I will be taking you through the meaning behind Star Wars 6. And well, this is the decision. This is the moment. This is everything that we've been essentially leading up to, not only in the original trilogy, but also concluding the prequels, right? Because Anakin's character has been the only person who's been able to stay throughout all of the movies. So we're going to conclude his character too. We're going to bring, well, everything together in this movie. So let's get to it. So, yes, we have to overcome this idea. We have to overcome this problem of, first of all, Luke is born from Anakin, right? Luke is born from Darth Vader. He is born from evil, and that evil resides within him. And not only does it reside within him, it also, well, permeates the external environment in which he's in. So, it's a part of him, and it's also surrounding him. It's like, how do you deal with that? And well, the first thing that you have to do is, well, this is the idea that he struggles with Jabba, right? With Jabba. Very simple. This is how the movie starts. He must go back to Tatooine, right? He must go back to his home and confront the, we'll say, well, Fat King, right? We established that in movie 4, but also something like the economic part of himself. And I'll explain that. It's a very interesting idea. You look at someone like Jabba, and he is essentially the king of the underworld, right? He's doing everything to, well, dominate everybody, and he doesn't really care about anything. That's the way he's sort of, projected. He just smokes, he eats all that he wants, and literally does whatever he wants. He's the top of a hierarchy, right? He's the top of, let's say, the economic hierarchy. In other words, he makes money, but he's the top of a crappy hierarchy, right? He's the top of the wrong hierarchy. And the question is that where you want to be? Is that where you want to be? It's like, this is the offer for people on Wall Street. It's like, well, you can be the top of the economic hierarchy. You can, and you could do it. If you go on Wall Street, you make all the money in the world, you are the top of the economic hierarchy. Congratulations. You also get status, you also get wealth, you also get, well, something like dominion over people, something like power, and you win that hierarchy. But is that the one that you want to win? Is that the one that you're going to choose? And, well, Jabba is the representation of that. It's a quote that I said before. The problem with the rat race is that at the end of the day, you're still a rat. And that's what Jabba is. He's a rat. He's a slug. Same idea. And, well, that's what he does. So you look at what is the characteristics of someone like this, and he uses people and things as tools. He doesn't really see the value in them. So, for example, he takes Leia, who is the divine feminine, you could say. She's the spirit and life of the Republic. And he just uses her as something like a sex slave, right? And you could say, okay, what does that mean? It's very simple. He doesn't see her as a person, right? He sees her as a tool for his sexual gratification. What does he see R2-D2 as? Instead of seeing him as the curious, adventurous type that's going to push you forward on your mission, which he's been doing throughout all of the 5 movies, he uses him as a waiter, as sort of like as someone who could just pass around drinks, because that's what he looks like on the outside as useful. And the same idea goes with Han Solo. He takes Han Solo, frozen in carbonite from the last movie, and uses him as just a mantelpiece. He uses him as, we could say, well, a status symbol. Right? A status symbol is a good way of looking at it. And all of these have one thing in common, right? First of all, well, 2 things in common. First of all, this is the Beauty and the Beast idea, which I explored very deeply. It's, you see the world as tools. You don't see the world as something that is full of life and is full of potential. Because Leia is full of potential, R2-D2 is full of potential, and so is Han, but he doesn't even care about that. Also, it's something like he doesn't care enough to dig deep within people. He doesn't care enough to look deep, and he's just more interested in what sort of shows up on the outside. And, well, that's exactly what a high-status person really is. It's like, okay, why would someone buy a Ferrari or a Porsche or name your luxury car and buy a big house with all these decorations? It's very simple. It's like, because you only care about what's on the outside, right? Status, that's reputation. All of those things are the things that are on the outside, but there's really no meat to it. There was this, well, I'm not going to say great, but it's a crazy story. It was the richest man in Germany, I think he was the richest man in Europe. He was worth something like $13 billion a few years ago. He lost, I think it was $1 billion overnight. Something happened to him, and he just, stocks crashed or something like that, and he lost $1 billion overnight. So you could say he's now worth $12 billion. The next morning, he ran into the train, walked into the subway, and committed suicide by running into a train. It's like, why? Why would you do that? Why does $1 billion lost tie so much to your self-worth, right? Why is money so tied to your self-worth? And you could say he had the biggest house and he had the most money and he had everything he ever wanted. He won the economic hierarchy, the thing that the American dream is kind of based on, this idea of economic prosperity and social status and the white picket fence, all of these ideas. It's like, you win that, but you're missing something. You're still missing something. You won the wrong hierarchy, and you won the wrong. You chose the wrong goals. You chose the wrong goals. You chose the wrong values. Let's say that's something like the dark side, or something like Jabba. And, you end up missing something. You forget life in the process. It's like, let's say you work 14 hours a day to provide for your family, let's say, or you work very hard and you sacrifice your relationships with your family. It's like, you're missing the point, right? You're missing the point. Then you're left with something like, all you are is an economic tool. You see yourself as an economic tool. You see yourself as only someone who can provide financially, instead of somebody who is a person who is providing in a humanistic way, right? Like, children wish for their parents, for example, to provide emotionally as well as financially. And if you only see yourself as an economic tool, as a person who provides financial resources, well then, and you act like that, right? Then you're in the wrong hierarchy. You're missing the point. And that's what Luke comes along to say. He says, I'm taking Captain Solo and my friends. You can either profit by it or be destroyed. He doesn't really want to change him, but, Luke is more powerful. He's chosen the right hierarchy. And at this point, he's a Jedi Knight. Or at least he thinks he's a Jedi Knight. It's a little ambiguous as to whether or not he actually is, but he does that. They go through all these things, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go through the exact actions. And they kill Jabba, right? They kill Jabba. And, what does that mean, right? Very simply, Luke, unlike Anakin, was able to go back to his home of Tatooine and conquer it, right? And show his mastery of it. And that means that he's transcended his childhood values. He's transcended the old person that he was as a child, right? You can imagine, what was he as a child? He was a farmer. He was a economically focused, naive child, right? That was what he was. And what does he do when he kills the representation of the top of the materialistic hierarchy? Well, that means he's killed off that part of himself. And That's the idea that I talked about in... Actually, that's the idea that I talked about in Star Wars 3 with Jesus in the desert speaking to the devil. The devil says, you could rule the world. You could be at the top of the hierarchy. You could do everything. But you have to sell me your soul, and you have to be, well, subservient to me, the devil says. And Jesus doesn't take the bait. Anakin takes the bait. And in this sense, right, we have Luke not taking the bait. Luke says, well, I am going to overcome the childhood person that I was. And that's one of the problems that Anakin had, right? Anakin, when I think it was in movie two, he went back to Tatooine, and he wasn't able to come to the right conclusion. He wasn't able to show himself as fully mature, and that was the thing that ended up biting him. So this is something that's rather powerful. Right? It's rather powerful. It's like, he's shown that he's able to grow. And this is what you do whenever you learn a skill. It's like, okay, let's say you learn how to play basketball, right? Sports are a very good example. It's like, well, when you learn how to play basketball, it's like, hopefully after a few years you don't forget the lessons that you learned, right? Hopefully you remember how to shoot, and you remember how to dribble, and with your left hand and your right hand, and you remember all these things. And then when you have to revisit them, and when you have to, let's say, start again or move on to the next skill, then you don't have to keep backtracking to go back to the previous skill. That's hopefully the process of learning and growth. But there's one problem that Luke struggles with, and it's very interesting. It's interesting the way that they framed it. He's got this metal hands, right, or this mechanic hands, and he tries to patch it up by the fact that it's a real hand, right? It looks like it's a real hand, but really he gets shot, I think, in the hand, and it exposes his wires. And that's a reference back to this movie, right? To the 5th movie where he gets his hand cut off. It's a very, very cool idea. This is the idea that they really explore here. And they did such a beautiful job with this because, well, it goes back to the last movie, right? Why does Anakin pull the glove over his hand? Why does he hide himself from the fact that he's part machine? And the answer is because he realized that Darth Vader, the machine himself, the full machine, is his father. He realized that built into his very bones, his very blood, is machinery, the capacity for evil. And even though he confronted his shadow in the woods, let's say, even though he confronted it sort of internally, when he faced that thing, when he faced the evil itself at the end of movie 5, he wasn't able to handle it. He wasn't able to handle it. And what does he do? He sees the fact that he's now part machine. He sees the fact that he is evil, or there's a part of him that's evil, and he hides it because he wasn't ready for it. That's a beautiful idea. And actually, when he goes to see Yoda, right at the end, he goes to Yoda, and Yoda says, he says, "It's unfortunate that you face Vader." And Luke says, "Unfortunate that I know the truth." And Yoda says, "Not ready for the burden were you." And to some degree, he's right. Luke wasn't ready, and, well, it seems like he isn't really ready to accept the fact that he is, well, evil, right? There's the potential of him for evil. And I had this realization, or I guess it was told to me a while ago. It was actually told by Jordan Peterson. So he gave this great example. It was for people who have PTSD. For most people who have PTSD from war, it's not from the things that they've seen. It's not from the atrocities that they watched. It's actually the atrocities that they watched themselves do. They started getting PTSD because they realized, wait a second, I'm capable of doing that. I'm actually capable of killing, raping, murdering, all of these things, and that was the thing that gave them PTSD. And well, that's the representation of this hand here. That's the representation of I am your father. It's saying, well, we humans do a very good job at externalizing our villains. We do a great job at saying Darth Vader's a villain, and well, I don't really have to worry about this. Al-Qaeda's a villain, or the Democrats are a villain, or the Republicans are a villain, and well, I'm perfect, and I don't really, everything else is really the problem. But Luke comes to this fundamental realization that, wait a second, the villain is not something that is outside of me. The villain is something that resides within me. And well, how are you going to handle that, right? Like, what could you do to handle that? And really, that's something like the shadow. And I had to confront this, and I'm still confronting it. You still have to confront this every day, but I confronted this when I watched the Milgram experiment. The Milgram experiment is essentially the reason why so many people conform, right? I explained this in the third movie lecture, but very simply, 2/3 of people are willing to commit the worst atrocity ever, which is murder, essentially, under the name of obedience, under the name of an authority figure. And well, it's sort of the explanation as to why ordinary men, why average Germans who weren't raised in the Hitler era still went out and massacred millions of people, right? Why is this a thing? And the answer is very simple. It's because obedience, the dark side of obedience, is built right into your very bones. It's built right into your genetic structure, to the bone. And, well, we have to confront that. We have to figure that out. And, well, Jordan Peterson recommended this. He said, put yourself in the position of a Nazi, whatever, person, right? And contemplate whether or not you are capable of doing those things. And if you come to the conclusion that you are not capable of doing those things, then you're naive. Because Nazis, just like you, were human. And built into our genetic structure is the capacity, the ability to commit atrocities. Tribalism is built into our very bones, and so much easier if you do it in the name of conformity. That's what the Nuremberg trials was about. It's like, well, if you're just obeying orders, then maybe you weren't the one who's doing the worst of the worst, and well, none of that matters. It's really just, it's built inside of you. You can do the worst of the worst, and well, once you realize that that is a part of you, then your entire frame of reference on the world changes. There was a Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He had a quote. I'm reading his book right now. It's the line between good and evil cuts between the heart of every human being. It's not something that's outside of you. It's within you, and we must struggle with that. We must struggle with that all the time. And if you don't believe that that capacity exists within you, well, you're naive. So, I like that idea. It's something like, just as we were born from God, it seems like we're also born from Satan. So, Luke's got to kind of figure this out, right? He's got to kind of, well, here's the thing. So he just confronted Jabba, right? And Jabba is the person who sees the world as tools and is very, we'll say, single-minded and only focuses on the material, right? Darth Vader is also that. They're very, very similar characters, but he is the full representation of that. He's like the boss level, if you think of it in like a video game, right? You can imagine that Jabba and Darth Vader are, well, both people who see the world as tools, but the only difference is that Darth Vader has this divine potential. He has the capacity to, well, take over, right? And take over you, take over the world, take over, say, the entire galaxy, which if we're going to say the galaxy is you, it could take over your entire personality. And Luke has to grapple with this, right? He has to grapple with the fact that not only is he given the capacity for evil, but he's also given the power, he's also given the strength to, well, cause a tremendous amount of destruction with that. That's not an easy thing to come to. And this is one of the things you see in parents really often. You say, okay, does any parent think that they're going to be a bad parent? Or does any current parent see themselves as a bad parent? It's like, no, we kind of blind ourselves from that. But do bad parents exist? Of course bad parents exist. So it's like you're blind of the evil potential within you. And talk about power. It's like parents have power over their child. There's maybe no more power than an impressionable child between 0 and 10. And then you also look at this from an individual level, right? Look at this from the perspective of you. It's like, what is the biggest regret, or one of the biggest regrets, of people in their 30s? It's that they wasted their 20s, right? Because, well, you realize, well, when I was 20, I was a little bit too impulsive, and I didn't really go for things that were meaningful. I kind of just pursued pleasure, and I didn't really have anything that I cared about. And, well, all of these things, what they're really saying is, I turned to the dark side for a little bit. I had this potential within me, this potential for destruction of my own psyche, destruction of my own galaxy, and I destroyed it. I destroyed it, and, well, we'll see a little bit later what you'll be left with. What you'll be left with. It's the undeveloped self, and we'll get to that when Darth Vader takes off his mask. But you have Darth Sidious, that's his name. Darth Sidious comes along and says, we don't want to kill Skywalker. We want to bring him to us. What he's really saying is, I want a new apprentice. I want to maintain this circle of essentially being the representation of the highest value, and then all I want to do is possess a different person to manifest those values. And you could think of that as something like, well, we'll go with the new one. We'll say pleasure, right? It's like if you make your highest value something like pleasure and having a good time, then that is not a thing. That doesn't manifest itself in the world. That's something like a virus. It's something like an idea. And that virus must attach itself to something. It can't just act on its own. It must attach itself to your cells and then multiply. And that's what Sidious is. He's an idea. He's a value system. And, well, he must keep finding, hosts to embody, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to keep perpetuating this value system of pleasure, and I think it's a really cool idea. It's something like in The Lion King, there is something like the circle of life, right? And the circle of life is a beautiful idea. It says, well, hopefully, year after year and generation after generation, we have progress. It's like my father had problems, right? But he had some good ideas. So I'm going to inherit his problems as well as his good ideas. And then I'm going to separate the wheat from the chaff. I'm going to keep his good ideas, but then I'm going to eliminate some of his problems and make life a little bit better. That's called progress, right? And then hopefully my child does the same. And we have this circle of life where by the end of it, or at least as we keep going, we separate the wheat from the chaff and we create progress as we go along. I'm going to call this, right, this sort of cycle that Darth Sidious is creating, it's the circle of hell, right? It's the circle of death. I like the circle of hell. And what it really is, well, I am going to cause the ultimate stagnation. Because really, Vader is stagnation. Vader is the representation of tyrannical order. nothing changes. I know everything. And, well, I'm just going to suppress all the individualities. I'm going to suppress all of the imaginative children, let's say, from a symbolic perspective. And we took down that idea in the third movie. Right? In the third movie, Anakin killed off the children, or Darth Vader killed off the children. And the idea there is, well, I don't have to think anymore. I don't have to come up with any new ideas because I know all the ideas, and that's the end of it. That's the end of it. I don't have to think anymore. And, well, obviously that's a problem, right? But that's the circle of hell, right? That's the idea that, well, then you can never grow. Then there's no progress. There's absolutely no progress, because if you think you know everything, then what's the point of trying to figure things out? So that's what Luke has to grapple with. He's got to grapple this idea. Well, Darth Vader's a part of me. I have this potential to be Darth Vader. I have this potential to be exactly Darth Vader. And what must I do? I must confront him. Yoda says, you must confront Vader. Then, and only then, a Jedi will you be. And I think that's a really great idea. It's something like, at least as an example, right? One of the fundamental markers of adulthood, you could say, because this is a maturity story, right? One of the fundamental markers of adulthood is something like integrating your parents within yourself, right? Something like including all of the positive knowledge that your parents give you, the positive ideas, and to the point where they can't help you anymore, or they can help you only to a minimal amount because, well, you've already internalized all of their lessons, right? You've already internalized all of the good aspects of them. And, well, that's when you become an adult because, well, that's akin to the death of the father. The thing that you see in every superhero movie, Lion King, Batman, Superman, where the parents die off. That means, well, you're responsible for yourself. It's all on you now. And every single thing that you have to figure out is you're going to have to figure it out yourself. You're not going to have anybody telling it to you anymore. So that's, well, in that idea, you must confront your father. You must confront the evil aspects of your father so that you could separate the wheat from the chaff and, well, progress from there, right? And become a responsible individual, and then come up with a new way of structuring the world, right? That's the circle of life idea. And they portray this so perfectly in Luke's visit to the jungle. So exactly what happens is he goes in and the first person he meets is Yoda, right? What is Yoda? We've already established he's the good representation of the Jedi culture. He is, well, he's done everything right and he carries the wisdom from the past. So we'll call this something like the positive aspects of, pick whatever you want, right? The Bible, American culture, Chinese culture, like whatever it is. You pick the positive aspects, and, well, what is Luke exactly going to do? He's going to, well, where is it? Right here. He's going to ask him questions, right? He asks him questions, and he takes the advice from Yoda. He says, well, why is it that you didn't tell me that Darth Vader was my father? And Yoda gives him a good answer, which is something like you weren't ready for the burden, which he wasn't. And then Luke says, I'm sorry, because, well, unlike Anakin, right, Luke is able to go into the culture, right, take this Yoda who has a mingled language and doesn't really make much sense, and understand him and learn from him, right? That was exactly what the fifth movie was about, and that was exactly Anakin's flaw. He saw this good aspect of the culture and only saw Obi-Wan. He only saw the inadequate part of the culture. But Luke is able to take the lessons from Yoda and then integrate them into himself. And that's symbolized very simply by Yoda dying and vanishing away. And, well, that's something that we see by the end of the movie. Yoda is eventually a part of him. Yoda is one of the spirits that he's able to constantly confront. And, well, that's the idea, roughly speaking, of rescuing your father from the belly of the whale. It's like you have a culture that was in the past and it was lost, right? It's lost. Some of the wisdom from the past is lost. And, well, that's significant because there is always old writing, old texts, old stories that carry wisdom that would help us today. Problems that Americans, people, you are struggling right now that somebody in the past, throughout our 200,000 years of human history, has figured out. And instead of, well, being like Anakin saying, I'm going to solve all the problems of the world myself, you could say, I'd rather not. I'd rather not take the 20 years of figuring this out, have someone tell it to me, and then build off their ideas and go a step further. You know, that's what a hero does. But the first step in that process is exactly that, the belly of the whale. Taking the culture from the past and we'll say going into, well, we'll use the belly of the whale example. It's a whale that's this is in Pinocchio, a whale that's in the bottom of the ocean that has swallowed up, we'll say, Yoda, or in that case, Geppetto, right? The good representation of culture, and Pinocchio has to go into the bottom of the ocean and get the father out of the belly of the whale. That's exactly what Luke does. He goes into this random jungle, which is just like the belly, and rescues the wisdom of the past from Yoda. So that's the first step, right? That's the first step. And next, he must confront. So he just met the good side of culture, right? Then he hears from the woods, Yoda will always be with you. What does he meet next? He meets, unfortunately, the bad side of culture. And this is represented throughout the entire series as Obi-Wan. So Obi-Wan comes in, and Luke asks him, he says, why did you not tell me that Darth Vader was my father? And he gives some roundabout, pretty crappy answer. He says, he ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. So what I told you was true from a certain point of view. It's like, really, man? Like, really? This is the problem that Anakin had with Obi-Wan, right? Obi-Wan was very suppressive. He was very repressive, and he wasn't allowing Luke to explore. He wasn't allowing Anakin to explore. And that's kind of what Obi-Wan was doing here. He also gives him some advice. He says, bury your feelings deep down, Luke. They do you credit, but they can be made to serve the Emperor. And that's also some pretty crappy advice, right? What is the main thing that the Jedi stand for? Trust your feelings. Trust your feelings. Embrace your feelings. Don't run away from your feelings. Don't, as Obi-Wan says, bury your feelings deep down. And, well, that's a problem, right? And what's really happening here, they did such a good job on this. They say, there are two aspects of the Jedi culture. There's the good aspect and the bad aspect. There's the good, well, there's the wheat and the chaff, right? Of every single system in which you've been placed in. No matter whatever system you're going to be placed in is inadequate in some way. And it's Anakin, well, it's Luke's job. Anakin did not do this. It's Luke's job to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? To separate Yoda's wisdom from Obi-Wan's wisdom. And, well, that's exactly what you must do with yourself, right? We'll make a direct comparison. It's like, well, you have some good parts to you, you know, you're pretty ambitious and you probably have a lot of potential, and you know that, well, you have a few strengths and you could really work on those strengths and you could even make those strengths better, and you could use those strengths to overcome your weaknesses. But then you also have weaknesses, and these weaknesses are, well, maybe you're lazy, maybe you don't work that hard, and maybe, you know, you fall to certain societal traps, and you also fall to biological traps, and maybe you're not your own person yet, but you take your wheat and you say, okay, I'm valuable. There are some things to me that are good, and I'm going to use to build off them. That's the entire field of positive psychology. And then you also have the chaff that exists within you, and you say, well, I need to first figure out what part of me is good and what part of me is bad, because that's not easy. And then you gotta say, how am I gonna get rid of the chaff? How am I gonna overcome the chaff? And the answer is to create. The answer is to come up with new ideas. And this is the one thing that makes Luke the hero. It makes Luke the, well, archetypal hero. He takes the lessons from the past, he finds the good, gets rid of the bad, and then figures out where the good was inadequate, and then builds on top of it. That's the circle of life. That's progress. And for Luke's case, he says, there's still good in him. When Obi-Wan is saying he's more machine than man now, twisted and evil, Luke says, no. I'm gonna go deeper. I'm gonna say maybe there's human in him. Maybe there's something better in him. Maybe there's something that doesn't meet the eye. And then Luke says, I can't kill my own father, right? He's continuing with this idea, and Obi-Wan says, then the Emperor has already won. So Obi-Wan, as the tyrannical inadequacies of the old culture, is saying, well, I know that I'm right, and, well, why don't you follow the Jedi Order? Why don't you follow it to the T? And, well, if you don't, then you're going to fail. That's what he tells him, and Luke says, no. You're wrong. There's something wrong with the culture that I've been embedded in. And, well, this is where I must create. This is where you must confront your father, right? You say, okay, there are some good parts that my dad had, and there are some bad parts that my dad had. And one of the things that I really, commend my personal father on doing, his generations past, right? They all beat their children, right? It was physical punishment was a very strong aspect of their household. And then you look at something like my father, he says, I'm not going to do that to my kids, right? It's a powerful lesson. It's like, well, he separated the wheat from the chaff. He said, listen, I still think my father's an amazing guy, but at the same time, there are some things that he did wrong, and I'm going to improve on them. And that's the hero right there. That's exactly what a hero does. But that takes an individual, right? That takes thinking. That takes for you to be able to separate the past. And so I wanted to get into, yes. So I wanted to relate this to, very simply, I explained this throughout the first 3 movies. This is Thus Spake Zarathustra. This is the 3 metamorphoses. I'll go over it again, right? Nietzsche, right, who wrote Thus Spake Zarathustra, said very simply, there are 3 metamorphoses, there are 3 transformations that we make as, people, right? If we're to do it right. It's something like, you start off as a camel, right? You're obedient and you learn the rules, right? Because, if you don't know the rules, then you're just a child and you know nothing. So that's what Luke does when he trains from Yoda in movie 5. Then you turn into a lion, and your goal is, as a lion, to fight off the negative values within the thing that you just learned. In this case, the Jedi culture. So what Luke does is he says, okay, I learned the Jedi rules. I know everything about the Jedi, and this is why he meets Obi-Wan after Yoda dies. And then he says, now that I've done that, now that I know all the Jedi rules, I'm going to figure out what's wrong with it. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with the structures internally and fight off the golden dragon. The golden dragon is the representation of the tyrannical aspect of the culture, right? So that requires for you to be able to separate the good part, we'll say Yoda, from the golden dragon. Obi-Wan manifests himself as the golden dragon here, and in this conversation, what Luke is doing is he's fighting off the golden dragon. He's saying to Obi-Wan, who's the golden dragon, he's saying, you're wrong. There's some parts of your culture that is wrong. There are some parts that are inadequate, and I am going to build off them. I am going to get rid of them and figure out something new. And that is the final representation. That's the final transformation of the three metamorphoses. It's the child. The child is someone who is imaginative and someone who looks at the world from a new perspective. And that's what Luke does. He says, well, maybe as you get older, Obi-Wan, maybe you become so rigid that you don't understand that you might be wrong. And this is actually something that you see in business, actually, which is really funny. It was Adam Grant. He did this study. He's from UPenn, and he did this study where he found that some of the best ideas that are made in the senior executive positions of business are not made by the veterans, because the veterans are blind, right? The veterans have been doing the same thing the same way over and over again. The people who make the best decisions, or at least the best, I think, judgment calls. So not the same habitual decisions. That's why you have the veterans. The veterans are for, well, we've always done it this way, and there's some good aspects to why we've always done it this way, therefore we should stick with it. But some of the best decisions are made by the people who are in the middle level. They haven't, it's not their first day, but at the same time they haven't been there for 30 years. For those people who are just kind of picking up the skill, they're able to, well, they're not stuck in the habitual manner of the veterans, but at the same time they understand the system enough so that they could recreate it. And that's Nietzsche's child, right? Nietzsche's child is, well, okay, congratulations. You figured out there's something wrong with that structure. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? How are you going to, well, re-establish, right? How are you going to pull apart the structure and then build it up? And, well, that's what Anakin was supposed to do, right? That's what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to say, well, actually, I'll have it right here. So I gave you this chart in the third movie, and I think it was the second movie, and it's the things that Anakin was struggling with, right? Anakin needs to decide, okay, do I go with the Jedis or do I go with the Sith, right? And well, you ask, okay, what's the difference between them? And I didn't make any revisions to this. You have, well, the Jedis are ignorant and they're a little blind and they're a little complacent. They're completely inadequate because Obi-Wan's inadequate. Yeah, they're a little repressive. They're a little overprotective. They're a little secretive, and they restrict his desires. That's what Anakin was struggling with. And then you ask the question, doesn't Luke go through the same thing? Doesn't he have to deal with the ignorant, blind, and complacent, in this case, Obi-Wan, the inadequate Obi-Wan, the repressive Jedi culture, which is, well, something like, I'm not going to tell you that Anakin was your father because, well, I'm protecting you, right? That's the next one, overprotective. They're a little bit secretive, similar idea, and they restrict his desires, right? That one maybe not as much. So you have Luke and Anakin struggling with the same exact problems, generation over generation. And you ask the question, what are you supposed to do? If Anakin did it wrong, what is Luke supposed to do? And you're supposed to take your inadequate, repressive, overprotective, secretive, ignorant Jedi culture and fix it. And fix it. Work from the inside and separate the wheat from the chaff, fight the golden dragon, and come up with new ideas. Adapted to the new times. But what Anakin does is he just says, I don't want to go through all that. That's such an annoying process. I'm just going to join the Sith. And, well, the thing about the Sith is he's the solution to all of those problems. It's the easy way out, sure. But makes life a lot easier. Being, all-powerful, being allowed to do whatever you want, and having all the material success in the world, not being the, reclusive Jedi. So, So Luke, in his fight, is going to have to really figure that out. But he finally comes to the conclusion. He says, I'm going to confront him. And you have Leia coming along saying, no, Luke, run away, far away. Why must you confront him? And Luke, he concludes, right? He comes back to, let's say, reality. He comes back to, in that case, the planet Hoth. I don't think it's Hoth. It might be Hoth. He goes back to the mission, and he says, I'm going to confront Darth Vader. I'm going to do it. And, well, you have, on the other side, you have Palpatine, who is saying that exact thing. Palpatine saying, his compassion for you, Darth Vader, will be his undoing. So, essentially, Luke's trying to implement a new system. Luke's trying to implement a new policy, a way to overcome the flaws of the Jedis, and the leader of the Sith, the bad guy, is saying, I wanted him to do that. I wanted him to do that because I know that he has, well, he's screwed. That's going to be the thing that screws him over. And, well, we'll see how that plays out. So, we have one more lecture, and we are going to watch Luke confront Darth Vader and figure out what the hell that means. So, take care.